I lay awake in the narrow confines of my tent, listening to the eerie symphony of the forest at night. The wind whispered secrets through the branches, and the occasional rustle of leaves hinted at unseen creatures prowling the darkness. Dave's soft snores provided the only semblance of normalcy in this alien world. Every creak and groan of the trees outside felt amplified, each one a harbinger of some unknown terror lurking just beyond the thin walls of our temporary shelter. The events of the day had left me in a state of heightened paranoia. Eric's gruesome death, the strange tapping sounds, the inexplicable presence of an extra person in my mind was a whirlpool of fear and confusion. I clutched the flashlight like a lifeline, its weak beam casting feeble shadows against the canvas. Sleep was a distant dream. My thoughts kept circling back to the journal I found among Ben's things and the ominous word that haunted my every waking moment: immolation. The night stretched on, an endless expanse of dread. I must have dozed off at some point, for the next thing I knew, Dave was shaking me awake. His face was a mask of panic, eyes wide with terror. "Jenny, get up. We need to go, now." I scrambled out of the sleeping bag, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside, the forest was cloaked in a thick, impenetrable fog. It clung to the ground like a living thing, swirling and shifting with each breath of wind. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dave didn't answer. He just grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the trail. We stumbled through the fog, the ground uneven and treacherous. The others were already ahead of us, their figures barely discernible in the dense mist. As we moved, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping itself around us like a suffocating shroud. The tapping sound had returned, louder now, more insistent. It echoed through the trees, a haunting rhythm that set my nerves on edge. We pressed on, each step a battle against the oppressive weight of the fog. The trail was almost invisible, and I had to rely on Dave's grip to keep me from losing my way. The tapping grew closer, more urgent, as if something was chasing us, hounding our every move. Suddenly, Sally screamed. It was a piercing, gut-wrenching sound that froze my blood. Dave tightened his grip on my hand and quickened his pace. "Keep moving," he shouted. We burst into a small clearing, the fog parting just enough to reveal a dilapidated cabin. Its wooden walls were weathered and cracked, the windows dark and foreboding. The tapping was louder here, coming from somewhere inside the cabin. Without hesitation, Dave kicked open the door and dragged me inside. The others followed, slamming the door shut behind them. The interior was dark and musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. We huddled together, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Dave shook his head. "I don't know, but we can't stay here." Before I could respond, the tapping sound resumed, louder than ever. It echoed through the cabin, a relentless hammering that seemed to reverberate through my very bones. The walls creaked and groaned, the wooden floorboards shuddering beneath our feet. Suddenly the tapping stopped. An eerie silence descended upon the cabin, broken only by the sound of our labored breathing. Then, from the shadows, a voice spoke. It was low and guttural, filled with malice and ancient rage. "Leave this place." We froze, our eyes darting around the room. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a disembodied whisper that chilled me to the core. "Who's there?" Dave demanded, his voice trembling. The only response was a low, menacing laugh. The walls seemed to close in around us, the darkness pressing down like a physical weight. I felt a cold hand brush against my arm, and I recoiled in terror. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Dave nodded, his face pale. We turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. The tapping resumed, now accompanied by a chorus of ghostly whispers. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of malevolent intent. Panicking, we looked for another way out. The windows were boarded up, the walls solid and unyielding. We were trapped. The whispers grew louder, their tone more insistent. The room seemed to close in around us, the darkness alive with unseen horrors. Desperation set in. Dave grabbed a chair and began smashing it against the window, trying to break the boards. The rest of us huddled together, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. The tapping had become a deafening roar, reverberating through the very walls of the cabin. Finally, with a tremendous crash, Dave broke through the window. Daylight streamed in, banishing the darkness. We scrambled out, the fog outside dissipating as we made our escape. The cabin loomed behind us, a sinister presence in the now clear forest. We ran, our footsteps pounding against the forest floor. The fog was gone, replaced by the harsh light of dawn. The forest was silent, the tapping and whispers nothing but a distant memory. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach. We didn't stop running until we reached the trailhead. Our car was still there, a beacon of safety in the vast wilderness. We piled in, slamming the doors shut behind us. Dave started the engine, and we sped away, the forest receding in the rearview mirror. As we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. The fog had lifted, but the sense of dread remained. We had escaped the cabin, but I knew deep down that the forest had not finished with us. Something ancient and malevolent lurked among the trees, and it would not rest until we were all consumed by its darkness. As we drove away, the tapping sound faded into the distance, but its echo remained in my mind, a haunting reminder of the horrors we had faced. We had survived the night, but the terror of the forest would stay with us forever.